So I'm super excited to talk to Cody Loughlin today with the Money Talkers podcast. He is an amazing person. I've actually known him probably about 6 months now, and I met him through his actual podcast. So if you guys haven't checked that out, definitely check out the Money Talkers and subscribe and comment and all that fun stuff because his podcast is awesome and I've been on it. So, it just, there you go. So it's definitely a podcast to definitely check out. But today, I get to interview with the man himself, Cody Laughlin. And Cody, please, for those that don't know, can you just give a little backstory of who you are, where you come from, and kind of why someone should listen to you or your podcast?
Whew. All right, that's a big question. What's up, Brandon?
Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. Life is good. So, I guess, I started 20 years ago or so. I went to school to be a marine biologist. Took my first finance class in school. And they told me about compound interest, right?
Right.
And so my mind was blown. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, what? I was just completely dumbfounded at how that worked. At the exact same time, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, so I immediately changed my major over to being a finance major. At the same time, something didn't sit right with me because I knew that 90% of the kids from my high school, and mind you, I was a year out of high school, were never going to hear this information, right? I was like, why are we not talking about this in school? Like, why did I have a pottery class? Why was I an auto mechanics? Like, I don't know any of this. Like, I memorized all the capitals around the country for one test and then lost it all, right? But I didn't know what a mortgage was. So I went ahead and just kind of kept that. I made a decision that I was going to go all out early in my life. And so I was able to buy a house, build a business at 24 years old. By 27, I had 4 companies, condo on the beach, rental property. And so I thought I was like, I just really figured this thing out. The Great Recession hit. I had 4 businesses built around real estate in South Florida. Within a year and a half, I was basically foreclosures, IRS lien, companies all gone, toxic, couldn't get a job interview, $700,000 in the hole, like just not good, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a big deal. And so, I had to really kind of look inward on that moment and say, okay, what do I not know? Like, what had caused me to do this? I've always kind of been that way where like somebody knocks me down, I want to hit them back twice as hard, right? So life had knocked me down. And so I said, okay, what do I need to learn to not be in this situation again? And I really kind of dove into personal finance. I became a commercial banker. And the reason I wanted to do that more than anything was because I wanted to go into businesses and see successful patterns. I wanted to see what business should I go into, right? And what they were doing that would make them successful. And I thought that would give me a kind of an in to do those things. And so I made it a point to do that. Fast forward, a few years. Well, also at that time, I found out about FIRE, and that was I know you talk a lot about, passive income, and I really didn't understand what that was until I started learning about the FIRE community, and that's an acronym. It's Financially Independent, Retire Early, right? And I found out about this whole community of people doing these things, and I said, man, I want that, because I was so far from that. I was like, that's what I want. Like, that's my goal. I want to do this. I want to be retired by the time I'm 40. Funny enough, I started I was reading a blog called Retire by 40. So it was kind of like fell in line, right? And so a few years later, was able to, had an opportunity to go work for someone that wanted to retire, that had built a business. When I got to the business, doing about $9 to $12 million in revenue. A year and a half later, bought it, took it up to $51 million in revenue and exited to a publicly traded company. Along the way, built a couple other things, built a real estate portfolio, built another business, in online sales. And so hit the Inc. 5000 a couple times. And really when I exited, I wanted to decide what I wanted to do. I wanted to have an impact out there, and so what I've done is I've kind of shifted focus, and I went into Money Talkers hard, because I really realized that thing that didn't sit right with me at 19 years old still didn't sit right with me at 40 years old, right? And that fact that we don't teach anything regarding money, finances, debt, interest rates, loans, entrepreneurship, successful mindsets, none of that is part of our curriculum today.
Yeah, it's insane.
It is. It just, I mean, it's going to affect literally every single person's life that is going to come out of school, and they're going to get thrown into what, quote unquote, everyone wants to get their lessons in the real world. Well, you're going to get these money tests that are going to come to you, and you're not going to be, you can either study for them or you cannot, right? It doesn't matter. You're taking the test either way. Right. And unfortunately, in the quote unquote real world, the test is not set up for you to pass, right?
Right. No, I totally agree. Like before you even get into the real world, in a sense, like I would say 25, 30 is kind of where you start kind of making a name for yourself. You kind of get into your business, but you have student loan debt, you have a car payment. Some people have a house or at least a lease on a house. And that's just constant debt that you have to pay, and you have to make up a certain amount just to even break even. So right when you get into the real world, you're at a negative income. And so many people just don't realize that.
Yeah, you're just you're basically borrowing from future you, right? And so the hours that you have to work, we don't talk about leverage, right? We don't talk about hourly leverage. We don't talk about property leverage. We don't talk about good debt and bad debt. You're instantly, everyone kind of goes in the same kind of trap, right? And once you're in the trap, then you're constantly just working for interest for somebody else,
right?
It's like somebody's going to be the bank. Right. You can either be the bank or you can be the borrower. And it is way better to be the bank. They say that, I think it's Einstein said that compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world. Right. And it was like, either you're going to be paying it or you're going to receive it.
Yeah. It's compound interest. I mean, we were talking about this before, but I mean, it's a snowball effect, right? Like and that's goes with anything. In anything in life, there's a snowball effect or a compound effect. In your business, if you go all in, you're going to and focus on one thing, you're going to have a compound effect in your business. If you you just continuously create debts, you're going to have a debt compound effect or snowball where that's why a lot of people have to file bankruptcy. But if you create enough cash flow, the same thing happens. Like you're able to roll that cash flow into more income producing assets that are going to give you a better return on your money or your return on your investment. And it just allows you to create more wealth. And it's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, generally what happens is if you figure it out and you realize the situation that you're in, you're looking at like a Dave Ramsey type of course, right? Where you're like, just get me out of this debt, right? And so you've already gotten there. But my whole thing is why do you have to get down into the hole in the first place? Right. I didn't know anything about, I was a finance major. I didn't know what a mortgage was. I didn't know, I went in and just didn't understand anything about how banking works, how interest rates work, how all this whole kind of game is set up. And, I've heard the phrase where I've said the phrase, my whole goal with Money Talkers would be to kind of rearrange Dave Ramsey's business plan, right?
I love that.
And I don't love you. I went Dave Ramsey classes. Okay. I had to do all that stuff because I was just so bad at managing money. But also I've also heard the phrase that he doesn't coach rich people, right? He coaches you out of debt, which is a huge service, because once you're in there, unless you take some drastic steps, a lot of times you're never going to get out, because you're already on the treadmill, right? You're in the rat race. And so, but on the flip side of that, it also is not a wealth building technique. Once you get to getting debt free, then what, right? You can't keep paying debt off. So you've got a lot more comfort in your life, but then again, okay, now what are you going to do to multiply that?
Right.
And that's where I think that the education portion of it becomes huge, because if we can get to kids, right, and especially if I can get the parents to be involved with the kids and have money talks. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek name of the company, because most adults I talk to, when I talk about this subject, they say, "Oh, my parents never talked to me about money," right? And it was just taboo. They didn't want to talk about it in the house, or they have very bad money stories built around the way that they saw their parents reacting about money. So they just were ingrained with bad beliefs. And so my goal is to be able to connect parents with their kids early, so that they can have talks that they can easily have, right? Explain easy things that they think are common sense. You don't need to be a financial wizard to talk to your kids about money. If you want to get into advanced level stuff, you can learn it with them if you don't know it. But at least that way you're building the relationship, so that down the road, when they have bigger and bigger opportunities, or they have bigger and bigger opportunities to go into debt. They're going chasing jobs. They're talking about moving around the country. They're talking about buying a house, buying a car, buying insurance, do all these things. You've already built that relationship. If you have never talked to your kids about any of these things, it's very unlikely that at 24, they're going to have their first money talk with you. If they think that at 16, you're afraid to talk about money about them or with them, you know?
Yeah, so many people just do, it's like you said, this taboo subject, and we always hear like the money is the root of all evil, and it's this huge emphasis on how money is bad. But in reality, money is actually a tool that helps us do things faster. It allows us to, hire someone who's a specialist and able to leverage their skill set so that we can, help more people much easier, much quicker than we could on our own. It's just a way to leverage our time. That way we can literally just leverage other people's time so we can do more in that given day and help more people at a higher level. And I think that if we're able to talk about money at such an early age, you just get on the ball that much quicker. And you're able to learn, all the ins and outs of what money actually does and how you leverage money and how you can just take it and take your life to that next level. So you talked about FIRE earlier, and I know you told the acronym of financial independence, retire early. I know there's also kind of different subsects of that. Are you more into the lean FIRE? Are you more into the fat FIRE? And what does that mean?
Yeah. So my goal was to build the income fast, right? I had already been pretty debt adverse at that point, being so far in the hole. And so what my goal was to build and let my assets build assets. That was the one concept that just blew me away through Rich Dad Poor Dad, that I didn't understand what an asset and a liability was. Right. Every time I've read that book 3 times, and all 3 times I've been in different points of my life. So I read the book differently. Right. And so at this point, if I have the ability to choose what I want to do, that means I'm financially free, right? I still own businesses. I still love to work. I still love to have an impact. Like I still, I don't think I can ever turn it off. I think I would literally just be miserable. I tried it for like a month and I was like, I can't do this. Like my brain won't stop wanting to solve problems. Right. And so, that really isn't, to me, like playing golf and putting my feet up is not really what the goal was. The goal was to be able to go out and have impact. And the goal was to go out and to be able to make the world a little bit better of a place and to be able to have time with my family when I wanted to. I was getting to where I am. I spent 7 years working 70 hours a week, 6 to 7 days a week sometimes. And I've got 2 little kids. And so that was my motivation, was like, I got to continue to keep doing this. Like I had to change my perspective so much because of the hole that I put myself in. So a lot of times when I hear people say, well, I can't do that, or I can't do FIRE, like that's not for me, or I can't build a portfolio, or I can't buy a house and start building passive income. Like, yeah, you can't buy 10 houses. But you can get to 1 if you set a plan and work yourself back to it. And if you did that annually, just to say, okay, well, each year I'm going to figure out how to buy a house. And then I'm going to start looking at different tactics, right? Like BRRR and all those fun ones. And, but at least like you have to take the first step. Right. That's the big key, is that you have to say, okay, everyone says they want to be rich, or everyone says they want to have financial freedom and do their own thing, but are you willing to do it? And then the only way to understand if you're willing to do it or not is to back it out and say, this is what I have to do to get there. Right. So if your situation is one that you don't think you can get where you need to be, well, what do you have to do to get to the situation you need to be? Like, could you pick up an extra $200 a week doing something? That's $800 a month. That's, $9,600 in a year. $10,000 is a 3.5% or 3% down payment on an investment property. Have you learned how to buy our real estate on terms? Right. Like there's all these like pieces that if you really want it, your scenario will allow you to do it. You just have to be willing to go out and say, I will or won't do what it's going to take. Yeah. Just like you were saying about like, can you buy a house every year? And that was kind of my goal. My goal was to
when I was a personal trainer, I was like, okay, all my clients who could afford to train with me at this time, and they were, coming in at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., they weren't having to show up to work. It's because they had their money working for them. And that kind of goes back to the rich dad, poor dad aspect of the four quadrants.
Yep.
I was like, okay, I'll buy a house. And if each of those rentals or tenants were paying me $1,000, I could essentially make $120,000 a year, and I can no longer do training. And so I was like, this is perfect. I can totally do this. So I bought my first house in 2015, bought my second house in 2016. And then I ended up buying 4 units back to back. And in 4 years, I had 10 units, which was essentially kind of my goal. And I was like, well, now what? And I didn't realize that, well, sure, I could buy these houses and make 1,000, but I have a mortgage, so I have to wait 30 years, or I can create more leverage and create more businesses to pay that debt off faster so that I can continuously snowball my income. And essentially, like you said, it doesn't shut off. So you want to keep solving problems. You kind of want to take your business to that next level. And it's funny because once you hit these certain tiers, you kind of see like a whole different world in a sense too, because you're like, wow, like this opens up a whole new like level to the game in a sense, because life is just one big game. If you think about it, it's just like you are able to leverage. And it's funny because all growing up, my teachers were like, there's no shortcuts in life. And I was just like, you're a liar, because there's so many shortcuts in life. Like I can literally go and hire Cody Laughlin about coaching me on how to leverage, my business, or how to take my business to that next level. I know he has a course coming out, so I'm very excited about that. But I mean, I can take all of his knowledge, and he can give it to me through just osmosis by being around him, interviewing him, him interviewing me, spending time with those people, or having a mentor. And I'm able to have a shortcut in life because I don't have to go through those trials and tribulations of real life. And it's just so amazing that we're able to take shortcuts in life because it allows us to get so much done quicker. And if you have the income, you can take so many shortcuts. And I don't mean like cutting corners and doing shady stuff, but obviously do things that make an impact in the world and are able to help other people. So I definitely believe in reducing all your expenses so that you can create a cash flow in a sense so you can keep reinvesting. I mean, we always talk about first paying ourselves, right? Like that's the first person you should pay is yourself so that you can literally use that money for long-term investments to reinvest. And it's just, I love talking finance with you because you bring the whole game to the next level. And that's why I love talking to you. And Cody, you're just an amazing person. So I want to go back to what you talked about with leverage. So like, what is like some of the pitfalls people fall into when they're just starting out trying to get their life together? Like, is it that they're in so much debt that they're over leveraged, or what's your thoughts on the pitfalls that we kind of fall into in life?
Well, just like there's good debt and bad debt, same thing works. Good leverage and bad leverage, right? I wanted to say something about what you were just unpacking, though, just real quick. And so you mentioned going from 0 to 1, right? And then 1 to 2. And then all of a sudden, it was like, okay, now I'm going 4. Now I'm going 4, right? Like that's the part that I think people look at and they go, oh, he's got 10 houses, he got 10 doors. What does he know about my situation, right? But you didn't have 10 doors. You had 1. Right. So you have to break down and get to that first deal. Like that's the one you just need to get to. If you're going to go real estate, whatever it is that you're going to do, you want to open your company, like don't look at where you need to be in 10 years. Make a goal. Yes. Break it back down. If I want to be here in 10 years, where do I need to be in 9? Where do I need to be in 8? Where do I need to be in 7? And the only goal you need to worry about is where do I need to be in this month, in the next 30 days? What do I have to have completed? Then what do I have to do this week? And so, like I said, if you needed $10,000 to buy your first place and you have 0 money in the bank account, right? That doesn't make any sense to you. But if I said you got to make $200 extra a week and put it away, and in 3 years from now, you're going to have $3,000 a month coming in the mail every month, right? Like, okay, Like I can do $200 a week. I can figure this out. You know what I mean? Right. There's side hustles, whatever is out there. So, I kind of almost wanted to touch that because you had gone through it pretty quick. And I'm like, that's a massive thing, is that you just had the first deal is way harder than the second. And the second, to go from 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2 is moving a boulder, but to go from 2 to 5 deals is not nearly as hard. Like doors start opening up for you and you start seeing things different because you're not acting out of stress. You're acting out of a position of strength. And so you're not making desperate decisions. You're not buying the only house you think you can buy. You look at 20 of them, tell them, no way, this isn't a good deal. And now my next deal is just going to be a killer deal, right? Because you now you have the confidence and the ability to take a position of strength. But you mentioned, having good leverage and bad leverage, right? Like bad leverage is I got to run just so I can pay stuff that I bought a month ago, 2 months ago, 4 months ago. It was really funny because I was teaching some 7th graders, right? And I was doing this presentation in front of them, and I brought my Lowe's bill because I have a Lowe's credit card that I use when I'm doing remodels and stuff. And because I get 10% off, I get points, I get all this stuff, but I have 0 interest as long as I pay it before the month the statement comes out, right? So I forgot one month, and it was a $2,000 bill. I forgot to pay it off before. I'm looking at it, and then it was like, if you pay the minimum payment, this will be paid off in 17 years, and you'll pay back like $7,500 for $2,000 borrowed. And I was just looking at it, and so I did some math, and I was putting it in front of them, and I was like, and they were like, "What? Why? Like, why would $2,000 cost you $7,000?" Because like the wheels just popped on instantly. So if you think that they're not listening, they 100% get these concepts, right? But I was like, "Would you guys pay $9 for a Gatorade?" And they're like, "What? No." I'm like, "Would you pay $92 for a pizza from Domino's?" And they're like, "No." Are you crazy? I'm like, "Would you pay $450 for a $100 pair of sneakers?" They're like, "What? No. Why?" I was like, "Well, that's what you do when you buy things on future credit, and then you only pay the minimums back on what you have to look at. Like becoming a payment buyer is the fastest way to get into bad leverage, right? So the opposite of that is good leverage, right? What you just mentioned. I have a mortgage. Well, what's that? Well, that is a lien and a loan against the property that you want to purchase. But if that purchase is one cash flowing to you, which means that the cost is less than the income, right? So you have a $800 mortgage and you're renting it for $1,500 with a couple other costs. Let's call it $1,000 total. You now have $500 a month coming to you. Well, that's great. That's so whatever the money that you borrowed is now producing an income to you for $500 a month. But that's not the only income it's producing. What it's also doing is it's reducing the principal balance of what you owe on that house. So now someone else is putting in a deposit in your piggy bank every single month for you, right? And not only are you having the cash come in, which if you get to the next level, which is that cash comes in and sits, that's your $200 a week that you were looking at, right? That cash comes in and just starts to sit and build and build. Now, when the next piece comes up, you do the exact same thing. Now it's $1,000 a month coming in the mail. 2 people are now depositing stuff into your piggy bank for you, right? Your equity is what you call it, right? Right. Plus, you have appreciation, and the property is going up in value. Hopefully, sometimes they don't. I was in the crash; it wasn't fun. But at that point, you're now you're built something on as a castle instead of a house of cards. Because if all of your income is based on you going out and working, the second that something happens that you can't go out and do the work, you now have 0 leverage in your life and in your income, right? You've got to have that. You've got to have that other stream coming where you're now not beholden to just how many hours you can work. The other part of that leverage piece is what you kind of brought up earlier, the cash flow quadrant, right? The 4 pieces. So the other part of leverage is building a business and using other people's skill sets around you so that you're allowed to do what you're best at, and building the business so that you now are multiplying the amount of hours that you're getting paid for work if you're running the business correctly. And that's a different subject, but yeah.
Yeah, no. And I mean, not only that, I mean, there's so many other things like creative financing with real estate. There's, like you said, appreciation where it grows. Some people don't get the appreciation. Some people do. There's tax benefits. Like there's
huge tax benefits. Yeah.
Depreciation. Like I was going to be talking about this in another blog post. And this actually is a great topic because this is a blog post I'm writing about. But like, for instance, all of our properties are in Las Vegas and we live in Texas. So if we decide, hey, let's go on vacation to Las Vegas, I can write that whole trip off and say, I'm going to check out my investment properties, but I need housing, I need food, all these different things, and I can literally write that off. And obviously, interest I can write off. We have just the increase in rents that are going every year. We increase the rent, so all these things add up, and it just creates a snowball effect on your investment, and it's just pretty amazing. And then obviously depreciation. So when I put on a new house, I can depreciate that, and that's just a tax benefit too. But it's just, there's so many benefits in owning real estate and in business. And that's why whenever I get into an investment, I always kind of figure out ways or get into things that have multiple streams within that income stream. So like, sure, real estate investing is one stream, but like we already went over, we're getting appreciation, cash flow, debt pay down, depreciation, tax benefits, creative financing. So like before I even bought our dream house, I had 5 units before that, which now I'm taking the equity through a cash out refi and transferring it in a sense into our dream house that we put 20% down. And that's literally like no money out of my pocket, but I'm getting like free rent in a sense, or I'm
yeah, assets buying assets, man.
Yeah,
and it's amazing the benefits and those kinds of things. For me, my favorite path to wealth is through real estate. Right, the fastest path to wealth is building a business.
Right,
because and that's kind of what I'm going into now. Is that that you build a business for exit. I didn't understand that at all. I always thought most people, they thought you built a business and then that was how you made your money and you got to do what you wanted and it was cool. Well, I didn't realize that was also, it's like building a house, except for the value is based on the income that you can produce and keep and run and make, but you have to have it to where someone else would be able to acquire it.
Right.
And if you build a business that way, you're building a business on a solid foundation. You're building a castle, right? Like I mentioned earlier, you're not building that house of cards that I built. I didn't know that. I was just running things out of the bank account. I just was kind of like, okay, well, how much money did I make this week? Or how much money did I make this month? Like, okay, great. Like I was never planning. I never looked at the balance sheet. I always looked at the revenue lines like everybody else, which is kind of what's crazy to me, which is like, you see all the online marketers and they're flashing their incomes, but they never show you the bottom lines, right? And and so there's just it's if it's done right, those things are now being able to create wealth, and that's what the idea is about mastering money. Like you mentioned earlier, it's a tool,
right?
It's a very powerful tool, and it could be a very powerful tool one way or the other. But the idea behind it is that the more that you know, the more power that you have. And by talking about these things and listening to these things, whatever you feed your brain, I learned this from a neuroscientologist that I interviewed on the podcast. Whatever you feed your brain, it looks to validate.
Right.
So if you're feeding your brain in things with like what you're talking about with the Money Friends, when you do your lives and you're talking about, when you've got your awesome zoo of family of animals having their little conversation, right? Which I love. So those things always crack me up. If you're feeding your brain with that kind of information, then you're going to start looking for that kind of information subconsciously. And that's where, when we talked about going from deal 0 to 1, like most people you're looking at that point or seeing or understanding or being around or don't think that way, your brain's trying to validate that, like, I can't have that. But when you go from deal 0 to 1 and then you go from 1 to 2, all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, this isn't that hard. Like, how do I go find deal 3? Because now you got the bug, right? And so your brain shifted. Nothing in the world changed other than the way you look at it.
Right. And so all matter of perception, right? Like our perception of the world is much different from someone else's. And, it goes hand in hand and kind of the 5 people that a lot of people say that you surround yourself with, or it's more of the 5 people you learn the most from. And I essentially surround myself and kind of like you did, where you immersed yourself in the fire, not actual fire, but the fire. I immersed myself into real estate investing. And that's exactly how I learned everything I learned in real estate investing. And then I wanted to learn about digital marketing and how I can find deals or how I can create cash flow. And I immersed myself into that. So it's the more you can immerse yourself into something and take action is how you're really going to, and that's the most important part, is take action. So many people buy these courses and then just let them sit and don't do anything with them and think that it's going to make the magic or make money magically appear, but it's not. You actually have to take action. It's kind of crazy. But I want to go back to what you were talking about, exit strategy. I think that's kind of a great thing to talk about, because I had a piece of software that was doing really, really well, and I ended up selling it to another development team, and I was able to exit that and make a pretty decent money on it. And so, and that was just based on the evaluation of recurring income. And so I like the idea now of building businesses to have an exit plan. I think we do that with real estate too. So can you kind of talk about like your exit strategy? I mean, you only have had a few 500, what are they called? Not top 500, but
5,000.
Yeah, 5,000 companies. I mean, you only had a few of those. So can you kind of go over like how an exit strategy works? And not, I mean, don't go too deep, but I would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So one of the best things you can do when you're looking at an exit strategy, right? It's like anything else where you're backing out into it. And so you mentioned earlier about having a singular focus inside of a business, right? And that becomes very attractive. And how do you do it well and better and everything else? So to be able to exit a business, the reason I said it's the fastest path to wealth is that the valuation of a business works a lot like the valuation of a multifamily property, right? You have a net income, and that net income has a multiplier depending on how easy that business is for someone else to acquire it and assimilate it into their business, and how the amount of work it takes to get the bottom line, right? And what I mean by that is, you had an experience with a software company. If you can make it an MRR, a monthly recurring revenue, you have an acquisition and you're showing positive acquisition of people, you're showing a retention. It's very easy for someone to put a value on that and see how long it's going to take for them to return their money that they invested to buy it. Right. And so when doing that, if you're the linchpin in your business, so there's a business cycle that goes through most business owners for entrepreneurs, right? And the first cycle is that $0 to $100,000 in revenue. Man, you're usually every employee in the company to start off with, right? And you're doing everything. And there's 6 pieces to business. And I see people fail with this all the time, because what they do is they gravitate towards the 2 or 3 pieces of a business that they want to do. And then they're like, I'll figure out the other parts of it. There's sales, there's marketing, there's operations, there's customer relationship management, there's finance, and there's HR. Right. And usually whatever you like, you'll focus on, right? Which is normally operations, or right now, a lot of people are trying like the marketing is like the sexy one, right? And it's like, I'll teach you the secrets to marketing. Like that's always the pitch. Right. And then it's like, they pull the thing back and it's like, okay, well, buy the next thing and I'll teach you the secrets. Right. And it's like, if you spend more money, like if you don't notice this, you're in their marketing, right? Like, so watch what they do, not what they say. First of all, that was my first tip. But when you sit down to look at a business, you need to look at all 6 of those aspects, right? I usually would say to start backwards. I would start in an HR and start up with setups and those kind of things. And then I would work backwards and like, how are you recording your financials? Because that's usually the one that people are like, I'll figure that out, because we don't get any training around those things. Not realizing that your finances are going to be a major indicator of your success rate on the front side of things. Most people worry about like practicing, right? They worry about marketing. They worry about those kind of things. They don't worry about the scoreboard. Well, the scoreboard will tell you if what you're practicing is working, right? And so it's and that's where like a coach can really come in to help, is they can guide you in these pieces. But that's where most of the failure comes from, is that they don't look at all 6 of those pieces. And I don't care if you have a 1-page plan. I don't care if you have a 2-sentence plan for each piece of that. But if you don't have a sales, marketing, operations, CRM, finance, and accounting plan and an HR plan, you're going to get tired, Like
Yep.
you're gonna take off, and these things aren't going to be problems until they're problems. And when they start becoming problems, you're going to do a lot less of what you like, and you're going to get stuck. And so I see most entrepreneurs in that 6-figure to kind of low 7 figures range are just getting worn out because they're in there, they're stuck, they've got people working for them, they don't know how payroll is going to come, like they're just running from fire to fire to fire to fire to fire, and the business just stops growing. And you're either doing two things in business, you're either growing or dying, right? There is no level off, because if you level off and you continue to do the same things you're doing year after year after year, someone else is going to get better at it than you and go past you and going to put you out of business. And that's why most people fail, is because they don't look at all these different aspects of the business. And so when I talk about building it for exit, if you're that linchpin, your business is almost valueless, right? If you're the product, if you're the piece that if they bought you out, they either have to replace you. No one wants to buy a business for it to have a job, right?
Right.
So I say that back. All businesses can be sold, but they're going to be much less valuable, right? Than if somebody could say, okay, you now have worked yourself out of this position, because at that point, when you're in those 6 figures and 7 figures, you have lifted and run with everything for so long that you're used to it. And you think you're the only one that can do things that way, right? Or I need to take care of this because you'll screw it up.
Right.
I promise you, whatever aspect of your business, somebody else loves that thing. Whatever you don't like to do in it, somebody loves it, right? For me, it's bookkeeping. Like, I don't like bookkeeping to save my life, but I know how important it is, so I get a good bookkeeper. Right. And then I review my financials every week because I know I have to. And I look for things as a business owner that's going to help me out to figure out what I'm doing. Being able to push off responsibilities to your employees, right? Everybody says they want to hold someone accountable, but they don't really understand that, like, if you're the one making the decisions, they don't have any accountability. So you can yell at them all you want, but if you're the one that makes the decisions all the time, then you're the one that should be yelled at, right?
Right.
So you have to learn how to push the responsibilities back into people. But the thing is if somebody from the outside, if you could take a 2-week vacation and your business wouldn't crash, you're built for an exit.
Yeah.
Most small business owners, not even close. If you can literally turn your cell phone off and take a vacation, let me rephrase that, because I've been the guy who took a 3-day vacation and spent 72 hours on this thing while I'm supposed to be present with my family, right?
Yeah, and I think just you look at, like you talked about, marketers online. I mean, you see this all the time. People on social media saying like, "Oh, I have all this passive income," and I'm like, if Facebook disappeared today, like, you wouldn't have a business, and it would dry up overnight, and you couldn't take time off. And a lot of these people, they talk about how they make all this passive income. They wake up and I got this $2,000 payment or $10,000 payment. I'm like, no, you put in all this extra work, and when you leave to go on vacation, you're still on your phone. Like, you don't have a business. You have a nice job that you've built yourself into, and you have no way to, like, your customer support is not there. And a lot of these businesses, they implode because they grow really quickly, but they don't have the foundation to support it. And it's so important, like you said, to work and grow your business backwards. You see where you want to be in a year, and 10 years, or not 10 years, that's too long, but a year, and you work your way back, kind of set milestones along the way and make sure you have every piece of the puzzle. And a lot of, like you said, a lot of people just work on the sexy stuff and not really either hire someone to do the non-sexy stuff that they really love, or they take it all on themselves and then do get burnt out. I mean, when I was a personal trainer, I was doing everything. And by the end of it, I was just so burnt out. Even though I was making a substantial amount of money, I did create a nice little job for myself. And by the end of it, I hated it. I didn't hate it. I mean, I loved helping people change their lives and their mindset and work on their bodies. But it was just draining because I was putting in 50 hours a week, and I was just really exchanging time for money. And that's what a lot of affiliate marketers do, or marketers do online, is they're really just exchanging time for money, and they're not really leveraging and having their money make them more money. So
all they're building is a P&L, right? All they're building is an income at that point, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, I don't want to come across as like you shouldn't try, if you want to be self-employed and make your own hours and do your own thing, like a personal trainer, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but you're not building an asset.
Right.
right? You've got a self-employed job. And so what I want you to do is think about, okay, how do I start to build an asset? Like, what would someone buy from me? What I would say is that even if an easy example would be if someone's a personal trainer and you were able to lock up 1-year contracts, right? And monthly recurring revenue, 1-year contracts. Like, you would have a book of business, just like the same way as like if you were mowing yards, like those accounts have a value to them. It's not a big value, but if you were a personal trainer and you had built out, now you've got online and you can leverage and you can start bringing in other personal trainers that work for you. And you are now building a business to where there's monthly recurring revenue, where virtual trainers are teaching people out there. And now you've got thousands of clients and you have an email list and you start adding products in now that you can go ahead and sell to your people. Like, and they don't need you, right? If you're no longer like if someone else, if Cody could buy that, and then you would just show me how to manage the business part of it, and it was running on its own, like, now you've got a sellable asset, and now you're going to get 4, 5, 6 times the bottom line. So when people are talking about like they make all their write-offs and they try to crush all their income on their business statements, like, for one, you can't borrow money, right? Like, that's the one thing, right? Like, your accountant, your attorney, and your banker all need to be involved in your decision making. Okay, and so, but for two, if I'm saving, let's say I was going to make $100,000 in the bottom line, and I was going to pay taxes, and at the end of the day, I'm paying a 20% rate. I'm paying $20,000 in taxes. If I write off that 100,000, I save my 20 grand, right? But if I go to sell my business and I've got $100,000 down there, and I'm getting the 5 multiple, it's worth $500,000. That 20 grand that I saved is not a very smart decision, right? I mean, so you don't necessarily need to have your business to where you say, okay, I want to sell this thing immediately. But that feeling that you got, that burnout, like, I hated it. And you're like, well, no, I didn't hate the part with like helping people and changing the, I just hated that I was going 50 hours a week and I was on this treadmill. Like, that feeling right there is exactly what I'm talking about, because almost all business owners, once you get to a certain point, get that feeling, because the linchpin is you. Right. The decision making is you. The linchpin is you. Luckily for you, you didn't have payroll, but the payroll is you, right? I've got to decide, like, you know, if we're going to spend $50 on these chairs, or we're going to spend $75 on the chairs, and I'm going to mull it over. Or you have meetings. The worst thing in the world is for businesses to have meetings and walk away without a decision. So I have a 3D meeting process that I go through, right? Which is, you to define the problem, you got to discuss the problem, and then you're going to decide what to do. I don't know how many meetings, you know, I've been to thousands of them. I would say like 99% of them, we walked out of there going, man, what were we doing? What did we accomplish? Right. And then it's always like, well, we're going to, let me think about the answers. Like, I was a king of that. And so I had to make that decision where I read something where it said more harm is done by indecision than wrong decisions. Right. Wow. And as I've interviewed high achievers and been around them, one of the main traits that I see from them is that they take the information that they have, they make a decision, and they see what happens. And then they make adjustments based on the outcomes of their best decision. Right. And the problem is, when you don't make decisions, you don't find out if you were right or wrong. You're always just wondering. Right.
Well, and that's our best data points, is our failures. I mean, you failed and I failed lots of different businesses, but we learned and took those as opportunities, learning opportunities, and then adjusted and made some great decisions after that. I mean, that's the best way we can learn, is by our failures and falling down. Like you said, like, you get punched and you fall to the ground, you want to come back up and punch life twice as hard, because you're able to take those learning opportunities and make, I guess, decisions based on those learning opportunities, and you're not going to make those mistakes again. I mean, obviously, there are some things outside of the control of that you could kind of do, like the housing market crashing or COVID, but you know, all these things, you kind of protect yourself. And that's, again, why it's so important to have a foundation for a business, understanding your goals, understanding leverage and not being over leveraged, and having recurring income, because that is like the lifeblood of our company. It allows us to make mistakes, because if we have recurring income, it allows us to do more testing. We know that money is going to be replenished the next month. So I think that, like you said, MRR, or monthly recurring revenue, It is the lifeblood of our business.
And really the idea about it, knowing why I say financials should drive a lot of your decision making is not because I'm talking about necessity, right? Like I'm not talking about like, well, I need to make this decision because in 2 weeks from now, this bill is due. What I'm saying is that it's a scoreboard for the chances and things that you're doing right and wrong, right? And so whatever you're doing right, you should be focusing on more. And whenever you're doing wrong, you should be cutting out. And so, but those decision making needs to be quick and decisive, but it's also for your team. Because if your team knows which way you're going in the direction you're going, then they know which way to run. If you think it's saying, "Hey, let me think about it. Let me table it on this on our meeting, our sales meeting, or our marketing meeting, or whatever it is. Let me think about it." They stop bringing you questions, right? And then the decisions never get made, and that's a big problem for a business because you're not finding the ways not to do it. Right? You've got to fail forward fast, right? That's the saying, right? Fail forward fast, right? But if you take that out, what I found was when I was doing that and I was telling people, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Because I was constantly doing that, right? For one, my stress level was through the roof. But we had a company. So we went through, when we were being bought out, we had a company come in. We had several private equity firms. We had family offices, which if you don't know are basically family money that's pooled together that they buy businesses with, which is an amazing concept that we can talk about. But and then we had a publicly traded company come in, right? And they were going to buy us. Everybody was like, "Wow, this is a great business on paper," and it was a great business. We're like, we're acquiring. This is what we want. You guys are great. And then what happened was, as we got into it, they realized that myself and my partner were the business. We were dragging, like we were running hard, so hard, and we were tired, man. We were tired and agitated and just wore out. And we're like, "Someone please buy this thing." Like we got it, and it just was like really hard and tiring. And one of them came in and they said, well, they gave us an offer sheet and everything. And then when they got in, they were like, "We can't buy you." I'm like, "Why not?" You're like, "You're not ready to be bought." I'm like, "What does that mean? Like, look at this business. We did $37 million in sales last year. Like, what are you talking about?" They're like, "If we acquire you and we take you out of your role so that you can now multiply over 10 of our locations instead of one, this one's going to fail." I'm like, and it was an eye-opening thing for me. And I didn't really realize that even though we had built this big business with 100 employees, it was the same problem. We weren't built for an exit, man. And so in 1 year's time from them having that discussion with me, I said, "Okay, well, we got to figure this out. Like, let's go find, when we took a book called Traction and Rocket Fuel, and then we actually took it and implemented it. But the gist of it was to remove ourselves as the linchpin decision makers. Right. And it was like, okay, I had to give up control, right? I had to give up control of decisions. And then, what I ended up doing was becoming a supporter in the decisions, but also teaching my team the way to make them, all right, the way to make the decisions and what their leeway was, and for me was always like, okay, I don't care if you make the wrong decision, but if I ask you why you made that decision, I want you to have a why, right? Don't just tell me I don't know. Right. And so as I started pulling these things off, I'm like, oh, this is going to get expensive. I don't have the money for this. Right. And like, they're going to mess this up. And like all those things are going through your head. And what happened is a year later, not only had we increased revenue by like, oh man, what were we? Almost 50%.
Wow.
Right. The bottom line skyrocketed 4,000%.
Wow.
And the life got easier. The decision makings became easier. I mean, we shot off, and I was sleeping better, and we had payroll all the time, and which I had a $600,000 nut to crack every month, right? in sales. Right. And so, you don't always know where the next one's coming. And this thing just kind of took off. And what I realized is that like, and the same company that told us no the year before came back the next year and paid more for it.
That's so right.
Amazing. And the second time when we asked, they said they offered us the same offer from the year before, and I said no, it's going way up. Right. And they said, "Why do you think that?" I said, "Well, last year you were buying this company." I was like, "This year, thanks to your advice, you're getting a discount on this company." And the guy was like, are you kidding me, man? And I was like, no. I go, and if you wait another year, you're not going to be able to afford us. And he was like, an hour later called me back. So you got a deal.
That's
Right.
amazing.
But because at that point, and then as soon as they came in, they were able to pull me out and go out and spread things into other parts of their business. So that's where it became, I was no longer the linchpin, right? I was no longer the piece that was causing the issues inside of the business. And so I know there's a lot of small business owners like that they think they can't let go of control because the business only runs because of them. But if that's the case, you're the problem. Right. And you've got to be able to work yourself out of that if you want to get some sanity back in your life. Have time, have cash, have you put controls and hold people accountable. Like all of those things are what being built for exit means, because I had to go through it and learn it. Even though I had been a business maker and I built this big, I learned what business owners did to be successful, and I was able to push this thing up. But then I had to learn, like, okay, but that still didn't build my asset that I wanted. Right. So I had to pull it back out and figure that out. And so that's kind of what my story's been over the last few years.
Wow, I love that. The whole exit strategy, building an asset. I mean, then there's so many different assets, and it doesn't have to be a business. It could be real estate. It could be a piece of software. It could be a business. I mean, there's so many different ways, and you just went over all of them, and I think that's so amazing. And I know you have this amazing course coming up and this coaching program called, I think, Built for Exit. Mm-hmm. And I really want to touch bases on that slightly. And we'll talk about, maybe there's a waiting list I know that you have where someone possibly, I know there's a wait list right now, so you guys can sign up. So he's definitely going to be releasing and opening the wait list for you guys pretty soon. But can you briefly talk about that, and then where can people find out more about you, and break it down for me?
Yeah. So I didn't go to coaching school, right? But I think about it like this. I have been in so many businesses, including my own, but I've lived and learned through these things. And so I don't talk about concepts, right? I'm actually talking about like steps, because there's a billion books out there you can read on concepts if you want to. But unless you've really lived the pieces, it's really hard to like relate. It feels good, you read it and you're like, man, this is good stuff. Like I love Mike McCallwich's stuff, right? Like I love Profit First and those kind of things, because there's actual tactics in there, right? I love this book called Traction because there's actual tactics in there. But you got to think about, if you sent out a team, right, and to play whatever sport you want to pick, soccer, football, whatever it is, I could give you the best players in the world, but if you don't have a coach, you're going to get whooped by the other team with a coach, right? And so that's kind of really how business works, is that you get to leverage. I mean, for me, 14 businesses, right? I've had, I failed 10 of them, and I'm very honest about it, but I learned a lot by those failures, right? I've done 7 figures in the other 4, and I've done them with all kinds of different businesses and industry, right? Because you start to learn things about what not to do and how to do them, and the real life lessons of what you should and shouldn't do. And, that frustration of like, oh, you're reading a book. Well, just give me $5,000 and I'll give you my video course and you'll be fine. Right. And it's like, no, man, like you don't know about my business. Right. And so when I know people are feeling that way, I want them to understand that like there is an unlocked piece, right? There is a piece for you to build, and it's not an overnight. It's not an instant success. But I can tell you this, if you put the pieces in place and you review your business and rewrite your business plan into what it needs to be for your business currently, because if you wrote a business plan before you opened your business, you're in a very small minority, right? If you have written a business plan since you opened your business, you're in a minuscule priority. But that's what a CEO does, right? A CEO's job is to read trends and give direction of all pieces of the business. When you're in a CEO role, you're built, right? When you're there to support, when you're there to vision, when you're there to go do the things that your brain is built to do, which is go out and find the problems and solve them, which is why you opened your company in the first place. Right. And you're not doing the pieces that you no longer like to do, right? I hate this company, right? Like those pieces that you don't ever say to anybody, because you can't talk to the employees, because they're not going to respond to your problems the way that a third party person would, right? And it's going to go bad if you start doing that. So please, if you take some advice, don't do that. But the other part of it is like, what do you do? Talk to friends and family? Like, they're not built the way you are. There's only 7% of the population that are entrepreneurs, man. And if you're one of those people, like it can be lonely, honestly. It really can, to be a business owner and to be struggling and then try to keep face, right? Like, if you ever think about, if you've ever gone to like one of those like not Better Business Bureau, but Chamber of Commerce events,
Oh my God.
right? Where like the mixer, right? Like, have you ever gone into one of those and like, hey man, how's it going? And they're like, oh, I can't make payroll tomorrow. You know, like, what? No, everybody's in there like, things are great. They're amazing. Right. They're awesome. Like, here's my card. Call me, right? And it's like, not everybody is that way, man. So if you need somebody to be honest with, right? You need somebody who's going to be able to look at the business with you and have been through your struggles and have done the things that you need to do to get the business back to where it needs to be, regardless of whether you want to sell it or not. The concept of is, if the business can run itself, which is the same thing that we talked about earlier, if the assets can buy assets, you've made it, right? That's the big key. That's the end goal. Well, if your business is built for an exit, that's the end goal, because you don't necessarily have to exit, but you can go do the things that are really going to drive your company much higher, much more valuable. You're going to have clarity. You're going to have speed. You're going to have an understanding. You're going to have a sense of, wait, I'm building something like a castle, right? I'm building a great foundation, and this thing is, impenetrable. And when there are things like what we're going through right now, there are going to be people that come out of this recession that are going to have amazing businesses, right? The next big businesses are going to come out of this thing, which is what happens every time with a recession. Okay. More millionaires are made in recessions than they are in bull markets, right? Yep. Because when everything's going well, it's a very poor teacher. When it's all rising and everything's going great and you're just trying to tweak this and play with that, but things are great, like, it's a very poor teacher, because you start to take your eye off the ball a lot of times. And so at this point right now, it's a time for a reset and to say, okay, I'm at a place where I want this business to be able to build this business. That's the asset buying the asset. And so if you start looking at the multiples and you say, okay, if I'm able to take this company from a $20,000 bottom line to a $100,000 bottom line, my asset just went from, let's say, a 5 multiple. My asset just went from a $100,000 asset to a $500,000 asset by raising 80 grand. Right. Can I make a way to get $7,000 a month more into this company?
Yeah,
probably. And you can make $400,000. That's why I say it's the fastest wealth builder is a business.
Right.
My favorite one is real estate, just because I've been in it for most of my life and I just really love real estate. But the fastest path is through the business. And so you don't want to take your eye off that piece and start to look for shiny objects, right? Or start to look like, well, this business is fine, but let me go start another one, and then and start to, because you're just like running away from the situation, but it's not going to help it. If you turn around and you say, okay, I need somebody who's going to coach me through these things, and they're going to look at the in-depth piece of my business. They're going to have a third-party view. There have been in thousands of businesses or had 14 different kind of businesses that are their own selves. Like, that's where you're going to see leverage come from my 20 years of experience, or any coach's 20 years of experience, right? And that's what you're paying for, is that knowledge. Or you can go do it for 20 years and figure it out.
That's a shortcut for life.
Hopefully, right?
Yep.
No, I figure it out. So
it's true, and it's so funny because it's just also a different perspective.
Yeah.
It allows you to have, like you said, have a third party kind of evaluate what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, and make those small tweaks to get you over that hurdle. So, Cody, it's been amazing. I've learned so much. I mean, I've kind of been building my businesses for exits, just like have you been talking about. And I have the love for real estate, just like you do. So where can more people find out about your exit, plan to exit business? Where can they find out? I mean, obviously you have a top 100 podcast called the Money Talkers. So definitely check that out. If you are a family and you have small children, he's all about teaching your children how to talk about money at an early age. So definitely check out his podcast, definitely subscribe. But where can more people find out about you, Cody, so that if they were interested in taking all your knowledge and taking a shortcut in business, then where can they find out about that?
Yeah. Right now, or reach out to me in social, ask me questions. I am more than happy to do, to do a call with you. I am more than happy to find out if the situation works for me and works for you. Because if it doesn't work both ways, I don't want to. My goal is not to sign up 1 million people to do things. I'm looking for people that are going to take action, that are going to have a business that can be helped, and to get them unstuck, right, and get them to where they can unleash that value in their company. Like I said, whether you want to sell it or not, when you start building with that goal in mind, and you keep that North Star principle where you're running at the right pieces and you're not running off into shiny objects all the time, well, then you're able to basically unlock the value in the company, unlock the bottom line, 3x, 4x, 5x the value of the company, sleep at night, and build a business that is now running itself. And so reach out to me, ask me questions. If you want to call, if you want to talk through things, I'm more than happy to do it. I love talking to business owners. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do. I love to be around them and talk to them as well, because when you're in that minority, in that 7%, like there's usually a little spark in there that when you guys talk, you just instantly like connect, because it's like, my problems, right? Can't turn it off. So reach out to me on any of the social platforms. And if you want to check out the podcast, which is based around financial principles and high achievers out there teaching personal finance and entrepreneurship and successful mindsets, it's on every platform you can think of. And you can also reach us at themoneytalkers.com.
I love that. And that's Cody Laughlin. Just so you guys know, everything will be in the show notes. So if you want to get direct access to him, he does want to make sure that you guys are a good fit, because there's nothing worse than working with someone who just doesn't align with what you're doing, because it's not a win-win for everyone. So again, Cody Laughlin, and check him out. Thank you so much, Cody. You are amazing. I can't wait to talk to you even more. I love always talking to you. You're always just a positive influence on anyone's life. So again, thank you so much, Cody, and I'll talk to you soon.
Man, thank you so much, Brandon.
Cheers. Peace.